I hate doing this. Quick show of hands. Anybody know what Aspire is? In Krakow? That's good enough. I was hoping for zero. Alright, so as you look at the title on the sheet, I wanted to talk a little bit about community. I wanted to talk a little bit about the value of community, and more particularly around the topic of trust within a community. And so to step back, I want to explain exactly why I'm here. As a representative of Aspire, this is an association we founded over 10 years ago. And for those who don't know, Aspire is an association that represents the corporate employers in Krakow, the dark side. It's a representative of 150 companies. It's about 80 of those companies are what we would consider to be the large employer companies. About 70, 80 of those companies are suppliers or associate companies. The background to Aspire was we recognized 10, 12, 15 years ago that the Krakow market for large employer bases was growing. We were all individual companies, we were all individual entities who were competing against each other. We weren't competing with each other, we were competing against each other in the marketplace. And that was not sustainable, right? And so the idea was, how do we form an association, how do we form a community that would be able to work together and add value back into both the companies of the association, and then use that to grow the scale of the market. It's been mentioned a couple of times over the last hour. Sonny mentioned, the visibility for VCs back into Krakow. Krakow doesn't have visibility, doesn't have a reputation in the market as being an innovation startup community. It doesn't compete with Barcelona, it doesn't compete with Amsterdam, Berlin, Dublin. And there's reason for that, is that there is not a unified voice, there's not a unified community, there's not a unified value that can position the market as the capability that it has to offer. This is the exact same problem we faced 10 years ago. We recognized as employers we could compete against each other and kill each other. Or what we actually decided to do was decided to band together and realize that building a larger market and building an ecosystem that was trusting was of value to all of us. Aspire started 10 years ago. We actually had our AGM, 10th AGM on Monday. Started 10 years ago with, 12 companies, 15 companies. And at the time we represented 8,000 employees in Krakow. The first conversation we had at a board meeting was, the market's overheating, we can't find talent, we're killing each other, what are we going to do? 10 years later, that market now represents 95,000 employees and it's still growing. So the idea that the ecosystem is growing is there. But that was only possible because we were able to step back and trust each other. Right? These are companies who compete in completely different business verticals. We don't compete with each other on a business sense, but we compete every day for talent. We're competing with you guys from a talent point of view. Right? And the only way we've been able to be successful is to recognize that building the market and building the ecosystem was the only way to survive. And creating Krakow as a destination was the only way to survive. So we've built that ecosystem both in Krakow and globally. The point I would get to is that that same ecosystem, and more particularly that trust, doesn't yet exist within this community. Okay? And I was going to spend an hour talking about social capital, but I'm not going to bother because I think my 5 minutes is already finished up. So I'm going to end on that point, right? This is the key piece. Within this ecosystem, and for you guys as employers and startups and idea generators that are very similar in your challenges but different in your approaches to corporations, what is it that stops you from creating that trust network that you need? What is it that stops you from building that ecosystem, that community that's going to add value to you as, companies, individuals, organizations who have decided that Krakow is a destination for themselves? What's the challenge? And I think that's the leading question. So I'll leave it with you at that stage. What are the parts around either trust or relationships, languages, culture, all those differences that all play into this mix? What stops you from being able to create a trusting community? Because believe me, from my experience over the last 20 years in this city and the last 10 years with Aspire, that's where your value is going to come from. That's where your ability to grow and scale and go global is actually where it's going to come from. Okay, with that, back to you.